Faction play is dead, and so is Solaris 7. But MechWarrior Online's quick play lives, for now. Servers are still active, content creators still upload, and folks still fraternize in forums. The quick play queues, thankfully, are still quick. MechWarrior Online, a decade later, eludes community-affixed declarations of dead. Dead game declarations themselves are often premature. A player base size necessary to keep servers online or queue times manageable often sit lower than we assume. Racevic dispelled the myth of a dead game. You don't need popular streamers on Twitch to find matches of your favorite game reliably. That being said, MechWarrior faction play remains properly dead. Writing about a properly dead game mode from an IP with an uncertain future remains risky, but you all seem to want it. Truth be told, I still often imagine what faction play could have, and perhaps should have, been. Faction play's story is worth telling. I'll just have to borrow footage to do so. Bear with me. Faction play's story begins with MechWarrior Online's original design pillars, one of which included a community warfare pillar. The community warfare pillar provided for communities, fans, to organize and compete. Fans received the idea, a MechWarrior first, well and with patience. Faction Play's December 2015 arrival, 3 years after formal release, delivered on that community warfare pillar promise. Faction Play presents a particularly pretty proposal to BattleTech fans. Almost 40 years of lore compose BattleTech's intellectual property from traditionally published books, tabletop miniatures, machinima, and fan fiction. BattleTech produces stories rich with drama, politics, conflict, war, characters, and battle mechs. For those unfamiliar, BattleTech feels like sci-fi Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones, BattleTech presents several noble houses vying for a central throne. Instead of Westeros, you have settled space surrounding Earth called the Inner Sphere. Instead of 7 kingdoms, you have 5, and sometimes 6, great houses. Instead of knights clad in steel armor, you have mech warriors clad in neurohelmets piloting big battle mechs. Instead of dragons annihilating armies, you have casual nuclear bombardments. Instead of red weddings, you have red weddings in space. BattleTech stories contemplate great houses jousting for territory, technology, or political influence. Those great houses are 5, sometimes 6 in all. You have the Draconis Combine, ruled by House Kurita, also known as the Ruthless Space Samurai. The Federated Sons, ruled by House Davion, also known as the Pompous Space Crusaders. The Capellan Confederation, ruled by House Liao, also known as the Struggling Space Soviets. The Free Worlds League, ruled by House Merrick, kind of, also known as the Infighting Space Capitalists or Purple Space Chickens. The Lyran Commonwealth, ruled by House Steiner, also known as the Fat Cat Space Bourgeoisie. And the Free Rasselhouse League Republic, also known as a short-lived buffer state full of Vikings, the sometimes 6th Great House. BattleTech fans imagined aligning with or role-playing as their favorite factions for nearly 40 years. We've imagined a PvP MechWarrior title with community warfare where we could paint our mechs, fly our flags, and fight over our favorite solar systems and planets for our favorite factions, or for money. Personally, I eagerly anticipated aligning with the Capellan Confederation Armed Forces, painting my mechs various shades of green, bearing their flags with curved swords, and ensuring Tikhonov never changed hands. My favorite mech designs stem from the Capellan Confederation-aligned factories or studios, the Lao Hu, the Sha Yu, the Cataphract, Lu Wei Bing, Sunder, and the Raven, to name a few. I like that the Capellans compromise the butt ends of most BattleTech jokes. I like their Russo-Chinese Space Soviet inspiration. Inspiration here remains key. Inspiration saturates BattleTech. BattleTech is full of imagination and committed themes, usually sci-fi feudalism or dystopia. But faction play, upon release and through development cycles, exhibited severe inspiration and imagination deficits. Faction play largely failed because PGI failed to commit to the original inspiration behind Faction play's design and failed to imagine anything grander. Faction play's initial reveal did inspire and spark some imagination. The music, finally mystic, spooky electronica sci-fi themes, felt MechWarrior. Initial startup pages fueled the imagination. The map included every system from developed capitals to lifeless peripheries. But the inspiration and imagination quickly dissolved upon zooming in. Upon closer inspection, systems are named, present, but nothing more. PGI included none of BattleTech's 40 years of art and lore. No descriptors, or brief histories, or pictures, or graphics, raw or reimagined. Faction play failed to include simple copy-paste efforts they could have pulled from Sarna.net. Upon closer inspection, special systems and planets received no extra attention. Regional capitals, like Tikhonov, received similar treatments to lifeless peripheral systems. Other than system color and unit tags floating above, Faction play offered no extra rewards or incentives for taking or holding certain systems. Upon closer inspection, unit creation tools and rewards were too limited. Common payouts included additional Seaballs and Cups of Pop. Player-to-player and unit-to-unit interactions were minimal. Upon closer inspection, conquering or defending territories was conducted through opaque, tile-based representations, not strategic bits of land or civilizations. BattleTech's patient fanbase seemed to be willing to wait for further developments, for the star map to receive art, lore, and flavor, for the introduction of curated environments, for additional unit interactivity, and for development to progress. We were willing to imagine the missing bits in the interim. But Faction play's development stagnated. Presented environments never received art, lore, or flavor. The remaining content, the new maps and game modes, had to suffice. Fans exhibited excitement over the initial new game mode. We had drop decks, new maps, and new objectives. The initial new game mode served as perhaps some sauce, garnishes, or mild toppings to the existing bowl of finely crafted, plain pasta. That initial new game mode pitted 12 attackers against 12 defenders asymmetrically. Attackers progressed through gated lanes, turrets, and enemy players to destroy generators protecting the objective in orbital defense cannon. Defenders aimed to prevent such. There was little room for creativity, figuratively and literally. The maps were narrow and forced head-on approaches every time. The lanes themselves were narrow valleys. Attackers always knew defender and objective locations. There was no need and no room for probing or flanking, no territory to claim midway, and no mechanics for retreating, repairing, or rearming. Mirroring quick play, map designs that suggested 3 lances to operate independently were routinely ignored. Players formed deathball parades through one narrow lane. And defenders simply stood at the end. Maps didn't afford anywhere else to consider. Maps presented no flanking angles or ambush-capable opportunities. Because attackers destroyed gates right before progressing, defenders' sole job remained identifying right, left, or middle. Both deathballs inevitably collided and fought to the death every time. Occasionally, attackers would attempt light mech rushes. 12 fast, small mechs sprinted past turrets and defenders to swarm a generator. They often survived just long enough to bring one down. 4 waves of light mech rushes were enough to bring down 3 generators and the main objective. If I remember correctly, PGI implemented a minimum drop deck tonnage to prevent just that, an effective suicide tactic of 4 waves of light mech spam. Both forms of predominant strategies, deathball melee and light rushing, weren't much fun on their own, much different from existing quick play experiences, very creative or rewarding, or in the spirit of MechWarrior. Because the game mode's only victory or reward conditions were greater than 0% or 0% objective health upon the timer's end, MechWarrior Online as a horde survival game dominated the faction play experience. Attackers usually repeatedly charged down narrow valleys, swarming objectives until destruction, completely disregarding their own personal survival, like a zombie. Defenders repeatedly slung ammunition down narrow valleys until low health or ammunition, ejecting immediately after to reload or respawn. Early on, the absurd amount of battle mech corpses littered the field and caused serious performance hits. These proved the overwhelmingly dominant player experience. Not particularly entertaining, not particularly inspiring, not particularly imaginative, and nowhere close to the spirit of Battletech. The initial presentation's excitement was subsequently met with mellow disappointment. The initial imagination of fighting over cities, strategic land, or familiar places dissolved upon the realizations made that each map would be small, 2 to 3 lane, narrow valley passage maps. Some were cold, some were hot, some were green, and some were brown. In addition to the lack of physical room for creativity, the objective design offered no incentives for player creativity or even self-preservation. Faction play ended up as a de facto wave defense mode. Most wave defense games that are designed intentionally as a wave defense game present players with a quantity of mostly vulnerable enemies. Left 4 Dead, Killing Floor, and other zombie horde games often challenge players to kill extreme quantities of relatively low health enemies, perhaps with a rarer, tankier enemy mixed in. Most wave defense style games present enemies with relatively fast time to kill. MechWarrior's time to kill is appropriately and uniquely high. Faction play's objective mode and map design enforced predominant strategies of deathball parades. A horde of 12 mechs, all with high time to kill, on maps that force deathballs will exhibit enough momentum for long enough to march past defenders. Enough will arrive and survive long enough to last stand or effectively martyrdom the map's objectives. It was entirely suicidal. If we could have strapped nukes to our mechs, we would have. Strapping nukes to a mech, suicide bombing the generators and subsequent orbital cannon would have been the most effective strategy. All that mattered was the 0% health report. That's a strategy entirely disconnected to player expectations, the spirit of MechWarrior, and Battletech lore. And it's because faction play failed to account for any in-game economics. Not only was there little space to stay alive and a lack of retreat, repair, and rearm mechanics to stay alive, there was no reward for staying alive. All that mattered was that 0% health report. Faction play disregarded entirely Pyrrhic or even total victory conditions. Winning with lesser tonnage did not matter. Winning with cheaper mechs did not matter. Winning without off-map resources did not matter. Winning with minimal casualties did not matter. Winning with minimal repairs or rearmaments necessary did not matter. Winning with fewer rare or advanced technologies did not matter. Winning within a faster time frame did not matter. Economics did not matter in faction play. There were no C-bill budgets, no repair windows, no pilot hospitalizations or deaths, no dropship travel times, and no incentives to win cheaply or efficiently. There were no incentives to beat the other team with fewer tonnage or fewer expenditures. There were no incentives to preserve ammunition, components, or entire battle mechs. There were ultimately no incentives for player creativity, because all that mattered was that 0% health report. Because there were no incentives for player creativity, the existing quick play meta immediately transferred to the faction play meta. Full investment into endo, ferrofibrous, double heat sinks, and exile or light engines regardless of the cost. The meta mech builds with clustered high torso hardpoints and often stripped arm armor remained. Mech versus mech weaponry loadouts, either boating and abusing one weapon type or left-click, right-click combos, were persistent. Because economics did not matter in faction play, it did not matter if your custom meta mech that costs 24 million C-bills was destroyed by a clever pilot with a stock 5 million C-bill mech. It didn't matter if your drop deck of only 200 tons beat out a drop deck of 240 tons. It didn't matter that your custom meta mech boated one weapon type with an egregious range bracket vulnerability. It didn't matter if you masterfully assembled and led a team of cheaper mechs and won with fewer casualties or expenditures, because all that mattered was that 0% health report. The game mode was suicidal, unrewarding, and demanded the same quick play, meta min-max builds, producing very similar deathball player experiences. Faction play, in a lot of ways, offered a lot more of the same singular dominant player experience, but this time with respawns. It begged the question after launch, why bother? And over the course of faction play's history, fewer and fewer did. The map's colors and shapes evolved, units affixed their tag to conquered or defended systems, and PGI reset the map or hosted special events every once in a while. But that overwhelming pool of imagination that we all felt upon starting faction play never grew into anything more. Aside from matching color schemes and unit tag names, organized units large and small never saw any real contracting opportunities. A distinct lack of cosmetic and functional investment opportunities persisted. Ownership credit of systems never yielded more than C-bills and cups of pop. Player and unit profit investment opportunities never arrived. We could never invest in minion units, various tanks, artillery pieces, infantry or power armor, or perhaps VTOLs. We could never invest in base building or defense. We could never invest in retreat, repair, and rearm mechanics via static or even mobile field bases. We could never invest in scouting and reconnaissance assets, or even just dropship improvements, perhaps even cosmetic dropship differences like the Aurora instead of the Leopard, or an 8 mech dropship for 2 lances, or the 12 mech dropship for 3. Faction play's small, lane-based maps provided little real estate for player creativity. Faction play's sole 0% health report objective design provided no incentive to win economically and no incentive to create mech builds that differed from the standard quick play experience. Faction play's lack of reinvestment opportunities provided no incentive to continue. Faction play, with more map designs, game designs, and economic incentives, could have brought our collective imagination to fruition. We could have seen a larger variety of matches, mech designs, and, most importantly, player experiences. Matches could have been scaled down for 4v4 or 8v8 engagements that allowed smaller unit organizations to fight on fairer grounds. Matches could have been based on tonnage, allowing a greater variety of fights and challenges. They could have been based on C-bills, allowing a greater variety of mech builds, strategies, tactics, and theory crafting. Matches could have been budget versus budget. They could have been closer to the spirit of Battletech. The battle mechs in Battletech are dominant, valuable relics, sometimes family heirlooms. They're not disposable, nor are the MechWarriors piloting them. Throwing battle mechs and their MechWarriors into meat grinders antagonizes Battletech's spirit. The spirit of Battletech has always included room and incentives in the conflict for creativity. It includes combined arms and self-preservation. Winning battles profitably or efficiently is the spirit of Battletech. Winning battles profitably or efficiently underpins the entire design behind 2018's Battletech and even MechWarrior 5's campaign. Yet, it remains entirely absent in MechWarrior Online's faction play. Winning profitably or efficiently underpins many casual and competitive multiplayer shooters, Squad's ticket system, PlanetSide 2's resource system, or even just Counter-Strike's budget system. Winning a round with a pistol is a lot more efficient and yields rewards compared to winning a round with a rifle. It is an especially important core design staple in MOBA titles like Dota 2 or League of Legends. And that especially befuddles me, because MechWarrior Online's faction play clearly took inspiration from a MOBA title. Faction play consists of a map with 3 prominent lanes, generators to destroy in each lane, and a final base to destroy in the far corner. That sounds a lot like a MOBA. In fact, here's what's missing. The other half of the map, which could have just been an adoption of a traditional MOBA map, retreat, repair, and rearm mechanics, also known as incentives not to feed the other team gold, which too could have been an easy adoption of the fountain from traditional MOBA maps. Friendly, enemy, and neutral minions or creeps, which could have easily been tanks, hovercrafts, VTOLs, power armor, and infantry. In-game economics, which could have easily been C-bills used towards upgrading minions, repair opportunities, deployables, etc. PvP mechanics like stuns, knockdowns, and disables, which would give a definitive role to mechs like the Awesome. Neutral loot opportunities, which could have easily been the independent factions on the planet in the jungle, or a crashed dropship instead of the Roshan. On-map shops and vendors, which could have easily been buying or selling scrap to construct various pieces of equipment like UAVs or special minions. And better quirks. None of this plus 2% bullshit. A PPC shot should garble the HUD and targeting systems like a magic missile stun. An accurate LBX salvo should knock a mech's gyro out of whack, like Snapfire's scattershot. A swarm of LRMs hitting unarmored components should knock out actuators and provide mild stuns, like Draw's Frost Arrow or Gyrocopter's homing missile. The Cyclops' computer systems, perhaps, should be able to turn neutral creeps, like Dota 2's Chen or Enchantress. Would this translate to a MOBA entirely? Maybe. All of the pieces are there. Would MechWarrior Online as a MOBA, even initially unbalanced, provide an interesting, engaging, and larger variety of player experiences? Of course it would. As it is now, MechWarrior Online's offerings, quick play or faction play, are entirely too similar. Death Ball or Death Parade, 3-lane maps or Central Hill feature maps. And that's awful, because every stage of a MOBA fight can be fun, even the losing stages. Jousting and poking in a lane is fun. Duking it out entirely and pushing the next tower after winning is fun. Running out of health or mana and the frantic panic of trying to run away is loads of fun. Ambushing or intercepting those running away is also a lot of fun. Ganking or rushing to a friendly's rescue is fun. Surviving that gank attempt and making it back to base to repair and rearm safely knowing you didn't feed the enemy team any gold, that's fun. Wiping swarms of creeps is fun. Winning all-out duels is fun. Adding resources to the team after defeating a Roshan is fun. The big team fights are fun. MechWarrior Online as a MOBA offers players exponentially more experiences. It offers players space, time, objectives, and circumstances to create and explore. MechWarrior as a MOBA would have multiplied the quantity and quality of player experiences. MechWarrior as a MOBA was already 50% there. Although PGI ought to have firmly grasped the inspiration of MechWarrior Online's faction play, the MOBA design, I'm also not confident it would have satiated the grander imagination players held for community warfare. MechWarrior Online as a MOBA would probably have been a really fun 4v4 game mode, but it wouldn't have given players that grander imagination that we all wanted. There is demand for that grander, larger-scale MechWarrior sandbox. MechWarrior Living Legends' positive relationship with the community remains proof that MechWarrior fans want larger-scaled combined arms sandbox game modes. A game mode like PlanetSide 2. Another free-to-play title released in 2012, PlanetSide 2's strengths are MechWarrior Online's weaknesses, and vice versa. Where MechWarrior Online's core shooter mechanics are tight, modern, and reactive, PlanetSide 2's core shooter mechanics are relatively old-fashioned, clunky, and kind of slow to react.
hold down and everything.
Where MechWarrior Online's health pool design includes components and internal factors, PlanetSide 2 still uses a very simple pooled health system with their vehicles. Where MechWarrior Online's core combat mechanics are let down by small, narrow, and repetitive environments, PlanetSide 2's vast, wide, and various environments are let down by fairly disappointing core combat mechanics. But the disappointing core combat mechanics are entirely forgivable because the creative possibilities offered by PlanetSide 2 inspire player imaginations. Both in-game universes share a lot of similarities. It's not difficult to imagine Battletech assets in PlanetSide 2's environments. PlanetSide 2 is an FPS MMO set in a sci-fi setting, much like MechWarrior Online. There are multiple factions vying for a selection of territories, much like MechWarrior Online and the Inner Sphere. You've got imperialist factions who like autocannons, the Federated Suns, a rebellious faction with money and big tanks, kind of like the Lyran Commonwealth, and a pseudo-religious cult with advanced technology, the Clans, or Comstar depending on how you're looking at it. There's even semi-neutral factions used to balance fights, who could be viewed as mercenaries, or Comstar again depending on how you look at it. There's even a shared underlying thematic match where players can test, get this, hex grids of territories on a selection of continents, much like tabletop. Play enough PlanetSide 2 and you can begin to imagine what faction play could have been. You can fairly easily imagine a marauder cresting these hills, or a commando entering the smaller bases. You can fairly easily imagine this fleet of tanks holding off an approaching Centurion. Each one of PlanetSide 2's continents are unique and full of opportunities. A desert continent, an Arctic continent, a jungle continent, and an atoll/oceanic continent, etc., etc. We could have had PlanetSide 2's sandbox with battle mechs. Instead of contesting every planet in the galaxy, we could have had a unique selection of continents on curated planetary systems. The design work for many of these continents are already there, just go to Sarna. Instead of repetitive matches on the same maps over the same objectives, we could have had persistent maps with varying objectives and rewards. Instead of being forced to eject just to reload or respawn, we could have had proper retreat, repair, and rearm mechanics. We could have had mobile field bases, damn it. Instead of C-Bells and cups of pop, we could have had unit budgets, unit camouflage, purchasable and deployable dropships, combined arms objectives, and unit-to-unit contract mechanics. PlanetSide 2's persistent sandbox models are infinitely more entertaining, even with older-fashioned core shooter mechanics. Faction play didn't need to be a controlled, balanced, esport-friendly game mode. It needed to be a big, fun sandbox for friends. There is a distinct and limited entertainment offering in MechWarrior Online. The quick play meta is largely stagnant and narrow because players aren't incentivized to win cheaply or creatively. The player experiences are largely repetitive and singular because the game mode objectives aren't influential. It's always a committed death ball until outright obliteration. The game mode objectives aren't influential because there are no respawns. Quick Play's only real offering remains Deathball NASCAR with meta mechs. War Thunder's only game modes are two, largely conquest-based. But because there are respawns and a wider variety of threats, War Thunder offers players a much larger variety of player experiences. War Thunder's maps, too, offer in general much more room for player creativity, considering that it, too, is a free-to-play component health-based vehicle shooter with conquest-style objectives. War Thunder inspires players to be much more imaginative, with a relatively similar formula. In contrast, faction play's missing ingredients were inspiration and imagination. PGI's inspiration, clearly a MOBA-styled game mode, was clearly lost in translation, and the resulting game mode was fairly unimaginative. Faction play could have taken full and direct inspiration from all the good that MOBA has to offer, but the result was half-baked. Faction play could have also been imaginative and ambitious, but the result was neither. I think the Battletech fanbase was more imaginative than PGI. The conservative, low-risk approach was right there. MechWarrior Online's faction play could have so easily translated into a fun MOBA. But that route wasn't taken. The riskier, ambitious approach was too right in front of them. MechWarrior could have so easily translated into a fun MMO FPS like PlanetSide 2. The hex grids have been around since its tabletop conception, but that route wasn't taken. I've been so hesitant to write about MechWarrior Online's faction play because I don't hold the confidence it'll ever really be invested in. It's easier to write about titles that have regular releases or updates on a longer shelf life, but I'm still constantly imagining MechWarrior Online's faction play done right. I'm imagining MechWarrior Online as a 4 vs 4 MOBA or Battle Mechs in PlanetSide 2. It's like a recurring dream that I can't quite rid myself of, or a seasonal obsession. And now, with PGI's investments into MechWarrior 5, faction play could be saved. And it could be reimagined into either of those game modes. We have now the 3D assets and mechanics for minions and tanks and VTOLs and infantry. We have now the ability to produce multiple large-scale environments through procedural designs. We could have unique continents made for planets alongside curated continents made for important cities and planets. We have now proven artists and storytellers to flesh out factions, characters, and places. We have now both the inspiration and ability to produce either reimagination for faction play. What we don't have, unfortunately, is the studio leadership or IP direction. PGI was fairly insistent on MechWarrior Online as an esport. Their best bet at accomplishing that would have been through MechWarrior Online as a MOBA, but that's not what I believe MechWarrior fans really wanted. I think our best bet would have been through MechWarrior Online in PlanetSide 2. But at this point, I'll take either. Show me a special event with some battle mechs in PlanetSide 2. Show me a fan-made mod with MechWarrior Online working as a MOBA. Show me anything at this point.